Welcome to oh god, I'm gonna restart that.
Episode 20.
Episode 20 of KT Confidential. Today we are talking how to find good tenants as a landlord.
It's a great topic.
It is. And what would you suggest first?
Oh, is that how you're going to defect to me right
Tip
away?
Tip number one.
Well, tip number one is really that it's more advice. It requires a lot of work. So if you are a full-time employee somewhere and you've got kids and you got a lot of shit on the go, you're not going to be able to manage this yourself. So don't start saving money. You need to hire a good realtor that specializes in that to take it on. And there's a lot of work to do behind the scenes.
I don't even think it's that. I think that's a big component, but also making sure you have proper exposure to connect with everybody.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm jumping ahead because I'm assuming you've given proper exposure. The unit looks nice and you're getting a lot of inquiries. You won't have the time to show the place. You won't have time to, do your proper due diligence on that person. You probably don't have as much experience doing it either, unless you have multiple units and have had them for years.
So I think one of the big things is, what do people need to be asking for documentation? Like, how do they vet somebody as a good tenant? How can they tell the difference? What are they looking for?
Documents.
All right. Which ones?
Pay stubs.
Yeah. So what does that tell somebody?
Well, first of all, you need a recent pay stub. We've had instances where you get a pay stub that's 6 or 8 weeks old, and then you call the employer and you find out that that person is no longer employed there. But so the first part of the application process, usually for a tenant, will be to fill in a rental application. And with that, they'll say, okay, I am making $5,000 a month. And then their pay stub will actually identify what their actual earnings are. So you got to know that. To see if it's affordable for them or not, but it'll also state, are they currently employed with that organization? We usually ask for a job letter to ensure that person is, in fact, still employed. And with that job letter, it'll give you a reference contact. So whether it's somebody in the human resources department or that person's manager or whatever. So if you want to pick up the phone and give that person a call just to make sure that person still has employment and that they have a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the pay stubs thing is really important. I think more so from an income standpoint, obviously, but also something recent just to verify that they are actively getting paid. I had somebody who submitted an application to lease one of our listings not too long ago, the one on Woodley. And everything looked decent except for the job letter was about 7 months old or more. So we ended up meeting with these people at the house before deciding on whether or not to go with them. And that in it was really important. And after that meeting, because my clients, they were actually inclined to give these people the opportunity to lease the property, but I insisted they meet them. And when we met them, their story was all over the place. They weren't employed by the company that they said they were employed by. They were actually self-employed. So immediately they're lying on their application, which makes you question.
Red flags right away.
100%. So immediately I would say I wouldn't even consider them. If they're willing to lie like that, then it just says something about their character, and I would stay far, far away. I think that's a big part of that equation, and finding the right tenant is learning about their story and if their story actually checks out with all of those documents. Like, somebody can have shit credit or poor credit, but could be going through a difficult time, right? Like somebody in the family died, or they lost a job, a divorce, they were ill and had health issues. I had a client that we listed their property for, and one of the applicants who ultimately really just couldn't afford this particular home, but one of the applicants went through
some cancer treatments and was off work, and collected a lot less money during that time, and had to dip into his savings and depleted most of his savings and had to use credit, then had a lot of outstanding credit. And it's unfortunate circumstance, but sometimes finding out about the story behind it and if all that story checks out is also important. And I always say you got to go with your gut feeling too. So meeting prospective tenants is always a big thing.
Absolutely. It's a huge thing. We have a client who's trying to get an existing client out of their property. And with them, everything more or less checked out when they brought them in. But the one thing they didn't do, they should have, was meet them. And I've since met them because I was helping our client drop off notices and stuff like that. And I guarantee you, if you had have taken that extra step, you would not have had the same problem.
Yeah, and we always recommend it. Some people don't want to invest that time in doing that, but
Yeah.
So in terms of documents, we look for the rental application to start the process. We want recent pay stubs, a letter of employment. Sometimes we ask for notices of assessment, especially if it's a self-employed person. People provide references, but who's going to provide a bad reference?
Yeah.
Like, am I going to give you the name and number of somebody that's going to talk shit about me or, say something bad about me? No, I'm going to give you the number
Do
of
you ever call references? I never do.
I do, because sometimes you can get different stories out of it. You should.
I never do. You know what I do is so get their current address, and I look up the previous listing for that address, assuming it was leased, which in most cases it is, or sometimes they sell and then they lease, so it could have been a sale also. And I contact the realtors involved on both ends there, and you can sometimes get really good feedback on their
well, that's a sort of a reference.
It is. Well, that's why I think it's a better reference, because it's not one that they are giving you.
Yeah.
Because like you said, they're going to give you their mom and their best friend.
Yeah.
So.
Well, here's a notice to any prospective tenant on any of our properties. I creep the shit out of them on social media.
100%.
Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, LinkedIn. I don't care if you're out there. If you have a website, if your name, phone number, email address, your previous address, boom, 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 boom. Something's coming up. I'm gonna find out something about you. Yeah. And if that story isn't checking out. And you know what happens all the time is people that have a dog and they're afraid they're not going to get the property because they have a dog, which we never really, very, very seldomly have not accepted a tenant because they have a pet. Can't do that. Well, you can, but
you'd be hard-pressed to do anything about it.
But how many people apply and say, oh, no, we don't have a dog. We don't have pets. You go onto their Facebook profile and you got fucking Bobo sitting on their top of their head, right? Like licking their face. I mean, come on. Some people don't put two and two together. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, dig in a little bit, find out about those tenants, what they're doing.
Yeah.
You got to do your homework. You got $500,000, $1 million on the line, whatever it is in your investment in your property, you're going to have somebody living there. You want to know who it is.
Well, and also something that we've done before is...
I don't know why I said Bobo. Who has a dog named Bobo?
I have no idea, but it sounds like an animal name.
Right.
More so than a human. So when you're selling your house...
Bobo the golden retriever.
When you're selling your house, one of the biggest variables in your decision is the price. How much am I going to pocket from the sale of this property? When you're leasing it out, it's not always the same. It's obviously, the dollars and cents is important, but who's in the property is more important.
People with bad credit and a poor rental history will always pay way more money than the property is worth.
It's like when you call, I think you had the conversation recently, but I've had a few not too long ago either, where you're putting an offer on a house and it's less than a previous offer when they sold it, but the deal fell through. And it's like, well, they didn't buy it. because they probably couldn't afford it, and it wasn't a realistic price. So yeah, people that can't afford it are always willing to pay top dollar, but sometimes pricing a little bit aggressively compared to market rent will give you a bigger pool of people to pick from.
Yeah, and we use that strategy all the time. I used it with our rental property. All of the condos were renting at that time for about $1,500 a month, the comparative ones, and I had it listed at $1,400 less, which is a lot of money for a rental property. And we had, 50 interested tenants within the first week. And we ended up selecting a nice old lady that she was a widow. Her husband passed away a couple of years ago. They sold their townhouse, or she sold her townhouse, and she was a great tenant.
Well,
paid $1,450 a month.
Well, as I was going to say, similarly to multiple offers when you're selling, people will come in with a higher amount.
Especially because most of the GTA, the supply for rental properties is quite low.
Yeah.
Now, credit reports. You want to get a credit report, preferably one with a score. We really like Equifax.
I think Equifax is the most detailed report, I find. I like it. We actually Ariel, Steve is working on a lease right now, and he had a tenant, or he had a realtor submit an application, and she didn't include a credit report, and she was completely against providing it. She's like, you've got enough information to make a decision. So that's, in my opinion, a red flag too. Why would you be afraid to provide something like that? It just makes
obviously
no sense.
Hiding something.
100%. So, and it's funny because she provided bank statements, and they're checking. They had two checkings accounts. Both were below $1,000 balance. So they got no money in their accounts, and you don't want to provide a credit report. Hello.
Yeah. Let's choose you as a tenant.
Yeah. So it's really important, if you want to stand a chance in hell to get approved as a tenant, to be completely transparent and provide as much information as you can.
Yeah. And from a landlord's perspective, you need all that information to make an informed decision.
That's right. So what's your opinion on pets in terms of, from a landlord's perspective? Would you be inclined to accept people with pets?
Well, I would look at the stats. Okay? 50% of people, I guarantee you, either have a dog or a cat.
Right.
So if you're not going to accept a dog or a cat, you're immediately eliminating 50% of the population.
Yeah.
What's wrong with having a dog or a cat in the place? So what we do, or what we always recommend for our tenants or prospective tenants that we're assisting in finding a property, and I did that with the folks that moved in just down the street from us. They had a dog, big dog, and she was scared. She said, we've always had tough time finding a nice rental because we have a big dog. So you know what I made them do is take some photos of the dog, of them playing with the dog, because the dog is a family member. I would never move somewhere if they didn't allow my dog. Like, what are you going to do with the dog? Shoot the dog? So you take photos of the dog. You take photos of the dog living in the current home. You get a letter from the current landlord saying, yes, they live here. They lived here with the dog. The dog didn't make any damage. Maybe you offer a damage deposit or something.
Even visit that house if you can.
Yeah. Meet the dog. Maybe you'll like the dog. I don't know. Why would you deter a perfectly suitable...
Well, and I would say people cause more problems than pets.
Kids.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? My kids in a week will make more damage in the house than the dog ever will in his whole life.
Yeah.
The walls, the floors, the drawers.
The one thing I can completely see is big dogs and hardwood.
Yeah.
Is a recipe for disaster.
Any dogs and hardwood, it might get scratched up.
Yeah. So
it's hardwood.
That I understand. But if you have laminate or carpet, not such a big deal.
Carpet, depending if it's potty trained.
True.
I don't know too many dogs that use a potty, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get it. Anyways, there are legitimate concerns, and I understand them. But as a tenant, there are ways to make your case a little bit more attractive. So that's important. And I wouldn't personally recommend lying about it because you're starting off that relationship.
We're not talking about tenants today. Come on, let's talk about landlords. So if you were a landlord,
yeah,
you have any problem with a dog or a cat?
I'd be hesitant. I mean, not in my current house because my floors are shit. They're completely ruined.
Because your dog ruined them.
Because my dog ruined them. But if I had nice, pristine floors, yes, I would be concerned. Now, at the same time, you can't prevent somebody from getting a pet afterwards.
So those people, let's just say you have a home with pristine floors and you've rented it to this nice couple that just got married. They both have great jobs. Their credit is amazing. Everything checks out, and you bring them on as a tenant. And 3 months later, they decide, we're going to wait to have a kid, but we're going to get a Great Dane.
Right. So you can't
do anything.
That's right.
So it's part of being an investor, part of being a landlord.
One thing I think that's important for landlords is not to be an absent landlord and make sure you're involved and go visit the property, maintain open lines of communication.
Yeah, make sure in the agreement to lease that it allows you to visit as well.
Well, the RTA does.
Yes.
As long as you give 24 hours notice. I don't even think there's a limit. I'm sure if you abused that right, they would have a case against you. But I think that's huge. You're running a business and your customer is your tenant. So you want your customer to be happy. So do little things like maybe around, once or twice a year, you come by with furnace filters or batteries for the smoke detectors, or you hire somebody to clean the windows once a year, whatever it may be.
We have clients that have a rental property here in Milton, and the tenants love the home. They take very good care of it, but they've developed an actual relationship, like a friendship, that the tenants invited the landlords for dinner.
Nice.
What a better way to check up on your house than if the people are inviting you for dinner, right?
Yeah.
And that all started off because when they moved in, the landlords brought them a move-in gift, like a bottle of wine and some flowers, and welcomed them to the home, showed them everything they needed to do with the home. So it's a relationship, right? Like if you have people living in your home, why not build a bit of a relationship?
Yeah, for
it'll
sure.
work out.
If you respect them, they're going to respect your home. So I think that's really it. Be thorough with your paperwork, credit app, job letter, pay stubs, references, sort of. And meet them. I think that's the biggest one. Meet them.
There's a lot of people now renting properties, so the pool of potential tenants is growing, and the pool of investors looking to become landlords or add additional properties to their portfolio is also increasing. So these are questions we're getting every day.
What are your thoughts on raising the rent? I know a lot of people that don't, because they have great tenants and they feel like it's a...
Are you saying raising the rent based on the allowable?
Yes.
So this year it's 1.8%, I believe.
Same as last year. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So if you have a home renting for a couple $1,000, you're going to raise the rent $36 a month. It's an extra $400 a year. Is it really going to make a difference if you have a great tenant?
Well, you mean, will a tenant balk at it? Is that what you mean? Or do you think, is it worth the landlord's while to do it?
Yeah.
I think it's worth doing.
Yeah.
Because...
it eventually catches up, right?
Well, 3 years later, you can't say, I haven't done it for 3 years, so now I'm going to do, the equivalent of whatever the last 3 years was permitted.
Yep.
So I think it's a good idea. And typically, I feel like those increases are still below market value, market rent. So,
Well, it's not even market rent. Expenses as a whole for carrying properties increase. Mortgage rates increase, property taxes, maintenance fees,
yeah. Well, some of those
property
things
managers.
some of those things you can increase in addition to the basic rent increase.
Yeah, you're just talking the rent.
Yeah. Anyways, I think they should do it.
So if you have a good prospective tenant in front of you, would you be hesitant to sign more than a 1-year term if you're the landlord?
Yes.
So you would recommend a 1-year term and nothing more.
Correct.
Would there be any deviation from that answer?
To go with longer?
Yes.
No.
So let's say the property is valued at $2,000 a month and you've got great tenants and they say, we want to sign on for 2 years and we'll give you $2,050 a month. Would you do it?
No.
Why?
From my understanding, it reads weird in the Residential Tenancies Act, but during that initial term, it's very hard to get somebody out.
Yes, you're right.
Once it's up, you have a little bit more.
You're on a
you have
month
a
to
few
month.
more rights. Yeah, you're on a month to month, and you can evict if someone has been late consistently. You can evict them for that. Not just forget missing payments. They're just consistently late. That's reason to evict somebody, but you cannot do it during that initial term.
Well, here's what I say when it comes to all of that stuff. And this is why it becomes way more important in doing your proper due diligence before you bring that person into your home. All of the legalities, everything is set to protect tenants.
Mm-hmm.
The Residential Tenancies Act does not protect the landlord very much.
No, they make you jump through hoops to do anything.
So regardless of what term, what kind of contract, what kind of lease you signed, whatever, as soon as that person is living in your house, if you've got a bad tenant or a professional tenant that wants to screw you over, you're going to have problems. Do your due diligence. Do your homework.
It might be worth just to go there and kick them out and deal with the ramifications of it later, if they take you to court. Like I know this one guy.
You got some balls saying that on record.
I have this one guy who his tenants are, I think, 6. Hang on, I'm trying to think of how far behind they are. They're like 7 or 8 months behind. It's like $16,000. So people out there, last time we posted something about tenants, there are a couple people.
You guys have given them all their notices to get the fuck out?
Yeah.
Time for the sheriff to come in.
Well, that's the next step. So he's got an appointment, I think soon, mid-April, to go.
Just check your watch.
I was looking at the date. I was just wondering how close we are. So he has an appointment to go. I guess they're supposed to go too. But even from there, then they get notice, and then there's another 30 or 60-day period. Like, it's ridiculous how long it takes. Like, if somebody's that late and that far behind, you should just be able to kick them the fuck out of the house, change the locks, and move on. Like, there's got to be a line. If someone's 2-3 months behind, like, draw a line and just say you can kick them out.
What do you think about landlords now circumventing the whole Tenancies Act by doing the Airbnb?
I wouldn't say they're circumventing. It's just a different business model. It's there's a higher degree of risk and a potentially greater reward.
Do you think that Airbnb should fall under the
No.
Residential Tenancies Act?
No.
Do you think there's any term? So if
Yes.
you rent through Airbnb for a month, should there be any sort of protection? Or if it's an ongoing rental, so 3 months?
No. I'd say they qualify. So here, there's a lot of questionable things because I would say it qualifies as a hotel, right? So here's a question for you, kind of related, unrelated. If it's a hotel, which I think it should be classified as because it's a vacation rental, why are they not paying HST?
Well, they should be.
but they're not. If you go sign up for an Airbnb and it's $100 a night, you're paying $100 a night, not 113.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
Sure there's no HST collected?
100%.
Interesting.
Well, 99%. You can check later and confirm if you want, but I'm pretty sure. And then when they sell
I wonder how many people
the house,
are actually claiming it on their income tax. Because that,
it's a huge. There's tons of tax evasion, I'm sure. And what about now when you sell the house? It's now technically sort of like a commercial property, right? Should the buyer be paying HST on the house because it's a commercial property? If it's considered a hotel,
if it's a business, I would say if the property is owned by a company and its main purpose is not a residential property, it's an income property, then yes, you should be paying HST. But only if it's continuing as a business. If you're buying it as your residential property, I don't know. Should you
well,
be
what
paying
if 6
HST?
months later you move out and decide to turn it back into one?
It's the government's problem, bro.
Yeah, I guess so. If they don't bother you about it, then don't say anything. But I'll double check that. But I don't think people are paying HST on their Airbnb
Check right
rentals. Do you look?
There's cleaning fees and
Yeah, so there's no tax. There's not even any tax on like the service fees or anything. There must be. Yeah, no, there is for sure. Just doesn't show it.
Is that a U.S. property?
I don't have to do. But no, there's no HST.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And do people have registered businesses when they're doing it?
You know what's happening now a lot is all of this fraud on Kijiji.
Yeah. People collecting deposits for rent on properties
Holy
that they
moly.
don't own. Is that what you're talking about?
There are ads. So what's happening is there's a lot of fraud. There are people pulling MLS listings, posting them on Kijiji. Prospective tenants show up to the property, never meet anybody, but they've already submitted a deposit. Or
I had somebody that happened to. They called me, and it was like that day they showed up and realized they got scammed, and now they were without a house. So they called me about one of our properties or something. So I would be very hesitant to look on Kijiji. And but I mean, you'd think it's common sense. Like, meet with the people. Not so common.
Yeah, I don't know. Kijiji is buyer beware, I guess. Anyway, so there's the tips for prospective landlords vetting prospective tenants. If you have any questions about renting a property or becoming a landlord, send us a message.